Greetings. I'm Bill Roebuck, Executive Vice President at the Arab Gulf States Institute. We're delighted to welcome you today to our program on Saudi Arabia, focused on the upcoming visit of Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman to Washington. We have a stellar group of scholars with us to consider each country's priorities and key enduring aspects of this important bilateral relationship. So let me introduce our panel and we'll get started. Kristen Smith Dewan is a senior resident scholar at AGSI. Her current projects concern generational change, nationalism, and the evolution of Islamism in the countries of the Gulf Cooperation Council. Dr. Hisham Al-Ghanem is a Saudi political scientist and former Fulbright Fellow at the Middlebury Institute of International Studies at Monterey. Dr. Al-Ghanem is a geopolitical expert and strategy advisor to senior executives and provides analysis for leading international institutes, think tanks, and media outlets on policy and strategy in Saudi Arabia and abroad. Greg Gauss has been a top public intellectual on Gulf countries for nearly 4 decades, most recently at Texas A&M University, and he is a member of the board of directors of AGSI. Bernard Heikel is a preeminent scholar on Saudi Arabia and other countries of the Gulf. He teaches at Princeton and has written extensively on Saudi Arabia, Salafism, and Yemeni culture and politics. He's also a member of the board of directors of AGSI. And our moderator today is Hussein Ibish, a senior resident scholar at AGSI. Hussein, with that, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Ambassador Roebuck. I'd like to welcome everybody to this webinar. We have a habit of gathering the best of the best, but this one really takes the cake. I mean, we have absolutely got the ideal group of 4 people to discuss the evolving U.S.-Saudi relationship in the context of the visit of the Crown Prince and Prime Minister of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman, to the United States. And we're going to go through the topic, looking at it from various angles. We already have a question in our Q&A function, so you can ask them at any time, and I'll triage them and ask our panel individually and collectively as we go along. So don't hold back. You can start asking questions now, and I'll be looking at them from time to time. I'd like to begin with Professor Heikel. And I'd like to ask him if this visit by Mohammed bin Salman to Washington constitutes a kind of crucial inflection point, not just in bilateral relations between the countries, but in his own relationship with the U.S. polity and his own kind of viability as an interlocutor with American society generally. There was a real fall-off of that after the murder of Jamal Khashoggi, though that was not the only complaint about him and his policies that was floating around Congress and the media, etc. But the murder of Jamal was sort of an inflection point in the wrong direction. Is this a turning point in the opposite direction, reopening the dialogue at every level, or is it just restricted to the White House, and is it not a big turning point? So that's sort of the angle I'd like you to look at, and in general, the state of the relationship. So I'll begin with you, Professor Heikel.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for having me. So my own sense is that the Saudi leadership thinks that there are elements in American society that can never be swayed for their own, ideological reasons. And so what this visit is about is really about solidifying a strategic relationship between the United States. It's a bilateral set of agreements that will be signed that will, from the Saudi point of view, make Saudi Arabia and the United States strategic allies. There will be the signing of several, something like 7 or 8 agreements, and the most important of which will be a mutual defense agreement. Ideally, the Saudis would want a treaty. That's not something they can get, but it'll be, an executive order plus an agreement and with the aim of ultimately getting a treaty down the line. And that is because the Saudis firmly believe that their security interests are intimately tied to the United States and not to any other country. I think this is, and America's military prowess was on full display with the Israeli war these last couple of years. So there's no question about the quality of the armaments and technology. So I think this is what the meeting is principally about. And then there are a number of other things, nuclear, mining, um, investments, and other side deals that will also be affected. The society question for the Saudis is a much more complicated one, and I think it's a much more difficult hurdle to overcome.
A heavier lift, if you will. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's right. But we'll see. That certainly, if this is not a major inflection point, at least it's an important development. So let's pick up where Bernie left off, Professor Goss, if I may, and ask you if you expect. Obviously, there's not going to be a full mutual defense treaty, which the Saudis and the Biden administration were pursuing with a great deal of bilateral success. But there was a big question mark over the Israeli role and what they were calling the significant Palestinian component, TM, which never got tested because of the October 7 attack on southern Israel by Hamas and others, and really kind of pushed the conversation until now. We do have the alternative of the kind of executive order that Qatar received. And it's obviously not a treaty, it's not ratified, it's a signature away from dissolving. But what do you think about the prospects for agreements, and especially from an American point of view, in the context of deliverables from this overture here?
So I think that the deliverables, the easy deliverables, are going to be on the economic side.
Yeah.
When the president went to Saudi Arabia some months ago on his first planned foreign trip, there were a number of deals signed in the AI space where, at least in my reading, and I'm no expert on the technological elements of AI, the Trump administration was willing to cooperate with Saudi Arabia to a much greater extent than the Biden administration was on, if you will, technology transfer in the AI realm. And while those agreements were signed in Riyadh, I think that this visit will be the implementation of those. Yeah. And it has to do with, buying high-tech chips and things like that. Saudi Arabia wants to be an AI hub, has the comparative advantage of relatively cheap energy to drive that. And so I think that's going to be part of it. I think Bernie's absolutely right that for the Crown Prince, this is also a time to solidify the security relationship with the United States. And to me, the interesting inflection point is not so much this visit. The interesting inflection point was the Biden administration, which really was the first American administration that came into office saying, in effect, we don't need Saudi Arabia, right? We don't want to deal with them because of human rights. We don't need them because we're the biggest oil producer in the world. And anyway, we're all going to transition to a green economy. Well, the Ukraine war and the run-up in energy prices basically led the Biden folks to do a 180. And they were the ones who were proposing things like a nuclear cooperation and a full-fledged security treaty. Right. Now, on the security side, and this will be the last thing I'll say, the Saudis have plenty of reason to wonder about the credibility of the Trump administration, because it was the first Trump administration that faced the choice of dealing with the Iranian attack on the Saudi oil fields in September of 2019, and in essence did nothing. Right. And I think that for the Crown Prince, nailing not the United States, but President Trump down to some kind of commitments on the security side represented by the executive agreement is, I think, one of the goals of the trip.
Fair enough. Thank you very much indeed for that. And just to orient the viewers, I think when you were talking about the 180 of the Biden administration, the key moment there in terms of public diplomacy was the fist bump in Jeddah, and I think viewers will remember that. So I'm just throwing that out there as a kind of chronological landmark, if such a thing can exist. Professor Ghanem, let me turn to you and ask you, what do you think of the same set of issues from a Saudi point of view, from the point of view of the Saudi government, and in light of the current political and diplomatic moment in Saudi Arabia?
I think it's important to point out as a visit disclaimer that being part of U.S. internal politics, to put it mildly, is not something that the Saudis want. The Saudis learned this the hard way, but it became very apparent that being part of the American internal debate would be, and is very damaging for the kingdom. And as much as possible, the kingdom is no longer willing to rely on a framework that shifts with election cycles. Saudis are seeking a stable, semi-institutional security relationship, immune as much as they can to political mood swings, and grounded in pure and clear and direct interests. And there is a simple reason behind this Saudi desire. There is no Vision 2030 within uncertainty. So we have this strategic maturity from the Saudi side. But having said all this, we must acknowledge that there is this special relationship between the US president and the Saudi crown prince that could be helpful for both sides in an institutional manner. Now, to make it simple, I believe that there are three main objectives for the Saudis and the crown prince. First, it's an announcement that the relationship is back on track after years of ups and downs, which I acknowledge could mean different things. But nevertheless, the crown prince meeting Trump in the White House is a big thing. It has a great symbolic value that no one can ignore. Second, which is more important, and jumping off what Greg just said, the Saudis seek a defense arrangement that delivers. The memory of September 2019, when Abqaiq and Khurais were targeted, still looms large, and it's always there in the background of the Saudi-US partnership. In my opinion, the new Saudi security posture is based on two foundational principles. First, security cannot be outsourced. It must be built and built internally. Thus, we have this massive localization of content as a major part of the Saudi Vision 2030. Second, alliances are measured by guarantees, not gestures. And let me point here that we are beyond the sense of deterrence that we kept hearing for the last 3 years, especially the last 2 years of the Biden administration. This wouldn't be enough for the Saudi side. I mean, having the sense of deterrence alone. Just yesterday, there was a visit by the Saudi Defense Minister, Khalid bin Salman, and also, interestingly, Msaad al-Ayban, the National Security Advisor, was with him, meeting with senior U.S. officials at the White House, including Marco Rubio, Hegseth, and Steve Witkoff. It seems this is an alignment for the political defense side of the visit. We also had Rumayyan also met Besnet on the business side, and there will be a significant business forum, Saudi American, during the visit. But I think this will be always in the background. I mean, a partnership with the American state, not America, the party. The Crown Prince, at this point, I think, recognizes that serious partnerships are forged not through media moments or partisan theatrics, but through sustained engagement with the pillars of American governance, meaning the Pentagon, the State Department, and also the intelligence community, which understands the kingdom centrality and deterrence, counterterrorism, and regional balance. I think there will be a serious effort from the Saudi side that this visit is not only about optics, which is important, but also about statecraft. But without going into technical or legal terminology, Riyadh is not seeking symbolic protection. It wants a credible and clear defense arrangement, not MOUs with no action plan, something more than the partial offers that the kingdom is getting now, which is a mixture of training, intelligence sharing, missile defense systems. The outcome should be, or we hope to be a serious upgrade from what we have here. What I mean by that, basically a plan that translates the US commitments. Many of these commitments are verbal until now, from a sense of deterrence into operational deterrence against threats that are no longer theoretical, specifically from Yemen and also elsewhere. I promise I will say this and stop. Just to manage the expectations, no one is under the illusion that a formal ratified mutual defense treaty is feasible under the current or even future US political and legal landscape. Actually, I don't think it's important or needed. But this is for a different talk. But however, a bilateral executive defense agreement, clear in scope, durable in structure, and backed by executable joint plans and localization of content, most importantly, can meet the immediate needs and fill the strategic gap. And also,
can you explain just for a second what exactly you mean by localization of content? I'm not sure all the viewers understand that phrase.
Part of the Saudi region, we have now SAMI and GAMI and the local industry for Saudi weaponry that is based on US weapons. So if without US assistance at this stage, it will be hard to translate this industry into a serious.
So you're really talking here about the development of a Saudi independent defense industry.
Yes,
for its own consumption and
exactly. Yes.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Professor Divan, my dear colleague, I want to turn to you to put the visit in the context of broader U.S. relations with the GCC countries, maybe how Saudi Arabia's relationship with its neighbors has been developing, and what this says about the broader U.S. Gulf relationship, and not just with Saudi Arabia, but with the region more broadly.
Certainly. Well, I think it's been very interesting. We've definitely seen greater unity in the strategic position of Gulf states, at least relative to what we saw before. I mean, you need to think that we're coming out of a decade now where we had first the Qatar boycott, which was based on a lot of very important ideological and strategic differences between the Gulf states. Even after that was kind of resolved post-pandemic, we then had that economic competition coming out of the pandemic. We heard a lot about that, about the economic competition between Riyadh and Abu Dhabi and all of the other states. So the emphasis has really been, a lot of analysts, I think, looking on competition amongst the Gulf states. I think that's still there. Of course, those differences remain. But the overall similarity, I think, in the way in this current kind of strategic and security environment that the Gulf states see, their interests, emphasizing economic growth, global integration, means that they see a lot of these top-line threats more similarly. And of course, that was assisted by the decision of, Saudi Arabia, and I guess you could throw the UAE in there to go towards détente towards Iran as a way of managing that major challenge, so that at least lessen the differences in the approach to the different states. And then I think a similar view too in starting to view Israel's kind of post-October 7th, kind of expansion of their military activities and even their holding of territory. Most recently, of course, resulting in a strike on Doha itself. I mean, of course, they were going after Hamas negotiators there, but actually striking a Gulf country also means that those significant differences in how they're approaching Israel also have kind of come a bit closer together. So I think basically, if you look at that, there's a lot more similarities. And again, we love as analysts to tease out the differences, but I think in the big picture, there's a lot more similarities in how they're approaching a lot of the bigger strategic issues, especially surrounding Iran, Israel. And we could also look at the Levant and kind of reaching out to Syria as well. And basically a position that they're looking for greater stability, regional global integration, nothing that will stop their global economic integration. So I think there's a lot more similarity in how they're approaching things. I think to some degree that allows Saudi Arabia to still play this kind of leadership role, being the biggest state. And I think for sure that they will want to remain to be perceived that way. And that goes into these kind of recent decisions that have been made on the economic side with the UAE, getting a lot of, higher deals with their AI industry being further along than Saudi Arabia, getting access to higher level NVIDIA chips, with Qatar getting this now, much closer military and strategic relationship partnership with the United States. I think Saudi Arabia, has been gone into in more detail. We'll definitely want to see Saudi Arabia leveled up on both of those economic partnerships and security partnerships to stay, level or above, seeing themselves as still remaining the leader in the Gulf.
Yeah, primus inter pares. Yeah, no doubt. Let's build off of what Kristen said. I'd like to go to Greg, if I may, with a question about where the U.S.-Saudi or how the U.S.-Saudi relationship has been affected by the changes in the strategic landscape that are quite dramatic following 2003 and especially 2004. Above all, the fall of the Assad regime in Syria really changes the equation, but also Israel's wars in Lebanon and with the sort of war of the cities, the 12-day war with Iran, less so the Gaza war itself. But that too, I suppose. There's a real set of changes here, and particularly the absence of Assad and the creation of an unfriendly regime unfriendly to Iran in Damascus and in most of Syria. So how do you think that's affecting the bilateral U.S.-Saudi relationship?
So I'd agree that the biggest long-term consequence geopolitically of what I call the broader Gaza war, those things that you mentioned, Hussein, is the fall of the Assad regime. I have my doubts about any other lasting changes coming out of this, but that might be a topic for another.
It's a big deal, right?
Another seminar, just how much is going to change out of all of this. But without a doubt, the Syria change is extremely important in the region. I think overall, Bernie made this point about the effectiveness of American arms in Israeli hands, but also American arms in the final strike on Iran. I think that, and the fact that, nobody was calling China when all this was going on. America had the diplomatic lead on this. Nobody was calling Moscow. It re-emphasized American centrality in the region. Yeah. I think that one of the big themes that the United States has both helped to generate, but also had to fight against in the last 15, 20 years in the Gulf is, well, maybe not 20, but 15 years, is that we're leaving, that we don't care.
Right.
And, this was not an unreasonable assumption, given the fact that we had 3 American presidents run for election on the platform that we were doing too much in the Middle East, and that we had to reduce our role in the Middle East. That's Barack Obama, Donald Trump, and Joseph Biden. So it's not unreasonable that people in the Gulf might think that we were trying to reduce our American role in the region, but that hasn't happened.
Right.
But that is a persistent theme, and the Saudi desire for a formal security agreement, even if less than a treaty, I think is a reflection of that.
Yeah. Agreed.
So just one more thing. The larger Gaza war, I think, sets back what has been a major American goal, which is to bring Saudi Arabia into the Abraham Accords, right? In that Israel is more salient, the Palestinian issue is more salient in Arab and Muslim public opinion as a result of the enormous violence that Israel perpetrated on the Palestinians as a result of October 7th, and because Iran is weaker with the loss of Syria, with the attacks on its nuclear infrastructure, with its inability to protect its clients and allies. The Iranian threat, which was, I think, one of the major drivers behind the Abraham Accords, at least for Gulf states, is less salient. And so I think one of the really interesting things that we might have to read the body language of on the MBS visit is just how hard the Trump administration tries to push on the idea of Saudi Arabia entering the Abraham Accords and normalizing with Israel. I don't think that that's in the cards. I think the Saudis have been very clear on that, but we know that that's what President Trump wants. And how much he pushes, I think, will be a really interesting thing to observe.
Yeah, let me turn to Hisham on the question of normalization that you raised. Where do you think things are? It looks from the outside much further away now, in the context of the Gaza war, because Israel has become more hostile to the concept of Palestinian statehood in any form. The consensus appears bigger, but the need for Saudi Arabia to deliver something on the substantial on the Palestinian issue is greater. So it looks like the parties are further apart, unless you could decouple the bilateral defense relationship and Senate ratification from normalization. What do you think? Where are we on this?
I mean, first on Gaza, I think the visit in itself includes much bigger issues for the Saudis, but Gaza is an important component of it. In my opinion, it seems that on the U.S. side, the U.S. administration views the French efforts as and this is my opinion, as pointless and maybe clownish. Saudis, of course, do not see it that way. But I have to say that the Saudis also are fully on board with Trump's plan, and they want to work closely with him. Whether you like the plan or not, but Trump managed to stop a raging war for 2 years now. No one else did. He gets things done, and the Saudis want to keep the momentum going. But we want it to be on a solid ground to avoid the cycle of violence erupting down the line anytime soon. But when it comes to normalization, the Trump administration is eager to frame normalization as a historic breakthrough in an exchange of a defense pact or high-tech cooperation with the Saudis. But the Saudis see the region for what it is. And I mean by that, the kingdom is not only seeking a symbolic normalization designed for headlines, but destined to fail under the weight of disastrous reality. And Riyadh operates from a fundamentally different logic, a qualitative difference, actually, than what the Abrahamic Accords, for instance, were based on. It's either peace that serves all or no peace at all. Normalization cannot and is not the goal in itself. It cannot be. It's a potential outcome contingent on a broader agreement that reconstructs a region on fair, lasting foundation. And any deal that does not begin with a serious political resolution to the Palestinian suffering cannot deliver real stability. We do not think it works, as simple as that. And I have to say this, and this is not a tactical stance. It's a long-term strategy based on three, I would say, non-negotiable pillars. First, a two-state solution as a baseline framework, not an optional add-on, which is very different. Second, a collective security arrangement that reflect regional balance, not bilateral pacts that deepen the lack of symmetry, as with the Abrahamic Accords. And the third pillar, a political roadmap for Gaza reconstruction, not a temporary humanitarian gesture disconnected from the realities on the ground. And if I may add, I think that there will be unresolved paradox. The core paradox that I do not think that this visit will solve is that Trump wants a quick win. The Israelis continue resisting meaningful compromises because there is no serious US pressure on them. And the kingdom insists that sustainable stability cannot emerge from an incomplete deal. We believe that sidestepping the Palestinian question for short-term arrangements would simply not work. The kingdom will not pay a huge political price for a superficial peace, that ignores fundamentals. It needs to be on a solid ground.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we'll have this cycle of violence erupting down the line sooner than later.
Right. Okay. Let me turn to Bernie on these issues, and let me just quickly point out that the centrality of the U.S. role was really underscored when Trump sort of intervened after the American strike on Iran to insist that the war was over. It looked for all the world like Israel wanted to continue with additional airstrikes on Iran that were in the air, and Trump, in an explicative-laden set of communications that were public, insisted that they not take place, and they basically didn't. The other thing I'd like to throw out there for Bernie to consider, and I'd like to get his views on it, and anybody else who wants to add this when I come to you, it's fine. The extent to which the crisis for Iran's power projection and Iran's strategic position in the region, especially with the loss of the Assad regime, may be making Saudi Arabia less keen on normalization with Israel, may make what Israel can offer to Saudi Arabia in terms of security beyond the bilateral U.S.-Saudi relationship and a potential defense pact less appealing. And it sort of, doesn't Saudi Arabia, other than that, get everything they need already from the Israelis? Would they really benefit that much from normalization? And any reaction you have, Bernie, to any of these questions would be, I think, really helpful right now.
So let me try to convey how I think the Saudis see the region.
Please.
Firstly, the issue of Palestine, while important, is not actually central. What's really a menace to them remains the Shiite militias, especially the Houthis and potentially the militias in Iraq and Iran itself. Now, what they worry about, and this is where I think I differ with some of the people here, some of my colleagues, is that they're worried that the Israelis are going to attack Iran again.
Yeah.
And that if Iran is existentially threatened, the regime is threatened, that it would launch an attack on Saudi installations of various kinds, not just oil, but kind of vital installations, electricity, communications, desalination, and so on. And that's really a great worry of theirs. So they see kind of two spoilers in the region. On the one hand, the Netanyahu and so the right-wing government there, and on the other, the Iranians and their militias. And the Iranians have not since being attacked after the 12th-day war, they have not sort of backed down. They continue to supply the Houthis with weapons. A number of shipments have been interdicted. They're still trying to support and supply both weapons and monies and funds to Hezbollah. Hezbollah is rearming as we speak. So, the Saudis look at this and they say, oh, we're in for another round, and so we need to protect ourselves. The other point I would make about the Saudis is that, for them, the Sudan is a very important conflict. I mean, they have over 1 million Sudanese in Saudi Arabia as residents. This is a real problem for them. So they think of themselves, and this is something they often use this expression, that they're sort of this beautiful garden in the midst of a fire. Hadika with hadika, is how they describe their country. And what Kristen said, I think, is absolutely correct. They have this vision of a stable, peaceful region. They're the hub of this region. They're sort of the economic, center of this region. And for that region to prosper and to ward off the threats of Iran and others, you do need to make a deal with the Israelis. You do need to normalize with the Israelis, but you also need to solve the Palestinian issue, because the Palestinian issue is what allows Iran and other, bad actors to constantly radicalize the region. So For them, Palestine is not just about Palestinian self-determination. It's really about de-radicalizing and stabilizing the entire region.
Regional
I mean,
stability.
that's what they want. And they don't see a prosperous region without Israel and Palestine being somehow integrated into this new order. And I think they've managed to convince President Trump, who's kind of very financially minded, and Jared Kushner and Witkoff and others of this vision, of this kind of vision of order and prosperity. And that's why I suspect the Trump administration has put pressure on Prime Minister Netanyahu to come to a ceasefire.
The Houthis remain sort of the perfect example of the two things coming together, right? The threat of Shiite militias backed by Iran on the one hand, and the way bad actors can appropriate the Palestinian issue to rationalize their
Yeah, and the
claims.
Houthis also, by the way, are extremely hostile to this. I mean, they're as hostile to the Saudi regime as they
Oh,
are
yeah.
to Israel.
No doubt about it. And since you raised the issue initially, Crispin, I'd like to get your views on where we are regarding the Saudi vision of stability and security, with themselves serving as an economic hub to balance and broker and provide a basis for that security and stability. But we don't really see that. We see still a region
Oh.
and it with a great deal of turmoil in it.
Well, I'm really curious because if we remember the last visit, well, when President Trump made his very first visit, we should underline that as president in the second term, also in the first term, but in the second term to Saudi Arabia. Again, all the headline before the meeting was about strategic, kind of military agreement, the big economic deals that were going to happen. We're anticipating all of that. Those things did happen, but also what came out of it was Ahmed al-Sharaa was introduced in Saudi Arabia, and the deal was sort of dealt with, negotiated with Syria. And I think
Now he's here.
yeah, and I think Ahmed al-Sharaa was just here in Washington. We can see how far that's really gotten, and I think Saudi Arabia played a really pivotal role, which is recognized in kind of brokering those closer relations. And that's really a big example of what they're trying to do. I mean, they saw that Syria was not going to be able to be integrated back into their region unless the US starts to lift its sanctions. And I think this is a recurring kind of theme. I think the Gulf states, again, all of them are very interested in this greater stability and greater global integration of the region, but they can't, as much as they're willing to move forward on that, they can't do it without steps taken by the United States. The United States has key hands, whether we're looking at Israel, whether we were looking at Syria and the sanctions there. We could look at Lebanon, which I think the Saudis are also interested in. I mean, the broader Levant. So I'm kind of curious to see if there'll be another surprise kind of announcement. I don't really expect on the Gaza situation, which is very complicated, and we could get into where we are right now on the Gaza situation, in terms of trying to come up with people on the ground and all of that, that can serve there, and disarmament of Hamas and all of that. But I think this overall view of turning these problematic areas that were once under the influence, we should say, of Iran and militias, which includes Syria, includes Lebanon now. Maybe at least the Lebanese press seems to think that MBS will have something to say on Lebanon in this trip. So maybe there'll be some negotiations to try to look again towards Iran, which I think they're quite worried about, as Bernie said, about the conflict reigniting between Israel and Iran. Trying to talk to the U.S. a bit about that and how they might be able to broker a situation that will improve and lessen that threat. So I'll kind of be watching for that to see if something like that will come out of it. But I think on the Palestine side, just to say one more thing, it's important to recognize that Saudi has really, after October 7th, taken quite a different strategic position towards Israel. I think they recognize that they know how valuable the card that they hold is, put it that way. They know that normalization could be enormously, or at least the acceptance of Israel could be enormously important for Israel's broader integration. And I think they were playing that game a bit with the Biden administration, hoping to limit the kind of extent of the damage, if we could say that, at post October 7th. I think when they realized that wasn't going to happen, when that Biden administration was not going to use their influence over the Netanyahu administration, then I think they took a different path. And it's kind of important to recognize that leadership role they've been playing, which is not just amongst the Gulf, but really trying to bridge between the Gulf states, the broader Muslim world, which again is this big leadership role that they can play, and European states who are seeing this very similarly. And that's kind of, I think Hisham mentioned it, but the French-Saudi agreement, which is not a small thing when we think of if any kind of stabilization of Gaza is going to need a lot of people investing in that. And we could see that as well in the unification and the position, trying to unify positions also between Jordan and Egypt and the other Muslim countries. We saw a lot of those countries coming to the table on this. So I think Saudi Arabia has been playing a big role.
It was also persistent. The French-Saudi cooperation on Palestine was persistent. They wouldn't be pushed off by events or by pressure. They insisted on, the issue coming back to it again and again until they got the kind of diplomatic stance they wanted. So Hisham, let me ask you about the Saudi position, the relationship with, say, Egypt on Gaza, with other Gulf countries on Syria, etc., and how they're looking beyond the Gulf in this current environment. Not necessarily, sometimes in lockstep with Washington, and other times pushing the Americans, as both Bernie and Kristen were saying, for example, on Syria, with regard to the new Shara government there. What do you think about this broader Saudi leadership role, which goes really beyond the Gulf area?
I mean, the bottom line here is whether it's a defense pact, a civilian nuclear program, advanced technologies, or access to next generation weapons. Each demand, I think, for the Saudis touches on one strategic imperative: to secure a stable regional environment that enables Saudi to realize its national transformation, free from both blackmail or disruption. I think the Saudis seek three things. The political breathing room required to rebuild its economic architecture. Second, and how can I say this politely? The removal.
Impolitely, it's okay.
Yeah, because it's recorded. The removal of disorder agents that drain regional resources and delay progress.
That now includes Israel, no?
Yes, a recalibration of regional deterrence, ending the exclusive dominance of actors like Iran and also Israel, who wield power without checks or consequences. I mean, the roadmap for the Saudis is very clear. The right to craft a stable, sovereign, and forward-looking model. Settling for less than that will continue the vicious cycle of violence in our immediate neighborhood, which concerns us the most. But Riyadh also comprehends that no nation can transform in isolation. Such a model demands an international partnership, especially with the United States, grounded not in domination, but in balance. A partnership that enables all responsible actors to prosper and shape the future. But when it comes to Syria, I think within this framework, Syria stands as a strategic pivot for the Saudis.
Yeah.
Riyadh does not view Damascus as a mere regime that survived war or was changed by war, but as a potential entry point to dismantle the regional militias, militia economy, and rebuild the sovereign states. But also in Iran, this is why the kingdom's decision to resume ties with Iran. This wasn't born of trust or strategic realignment with Iran, but from a clear calculation. Tension for the Saudis is a great burden, and no economic vision can flourish under the constant shadow of missiles.
Mm-hmm. And they do make, all the Gulf countries make inviting targets for Iran. If Iran is looking, in an unhinged way, in a way without consequence, to simply lash out at targets aligned with the United States. All the Gulf countries. And I think the Israeli attack on Qatar made it clear how much that vulnerability currently stands unaddressed. So let me ask Greg, if there's going to be serious discussion about that set of issues in this trip or not, because it strikes me that goes to the heart of the medium term, at least, relationship between Saudi Arabia and the United States to work, to work together. It's got to be in that context and not just a strictly bilateral.
Here, I think we're shifting focus from Saudi Arabia to the Trump administration.
Yes.
And I think that my biggest criticism of the Trump administration in this area is that they haven't taken advantage of these changed strategic circumstances to push the advantage and to try to if you will, use the momentum of the defeats of Hezbollah, the Assad regime, Iran, to try to further change the strategic picture in terms of militias. Specifically Hezbollah. The Trump administration has talked a lot about the disarming of Hezbollah, but I haven't seen real administration concentration on that issue. There's rhetoric, but not much behind it. In a situation where you have a Lebanese government that is at least better positioned and more willing to do things on this score than any of their recent predecessors.
There's a strange hesitancy to empower the LAF.
Perhaps, and I don't know how much of that is internal Lebanese. And
I'm thinking about the West and especially the US to give them the arms and the money and the training that they would need.
And I don't know if it's deliberate, Hussein, or just taking your eye off the ball.
Right, it's hard to know.
Right, and I feel this also on the Gaza, on the 20-point proposal. There was momentum there that has not been followed up.
Right.
And my fear is that the Trump administration's Middle East team, which is not fully staffed up in many ways, which relies on a small number of people who also have lots of other responsibilities, that there's been a fall away in implementation. And in that sense, I don't know if they would be open. I think they'd be open to a discussion of these larger issues that Hisham has raised, but I don't know if they would have concrete and implementable plans on that score. Iraq is a really interesting question here.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, the Iraqis are voting.
Right.
And the situation in Iraq is such that much like in Lebanon, you might have a situation where there could be momentum toward bringing the militias at least further away from Iranian control and more part of an Iraqi, more under an Iraqi cover.
Yeah.
But there's been rhetoric from the Trump administration on that, but I haven't seen anything concrete in terms of both carrots and sticks to help what will be the next Iraqi government on that score. So I just worry that while the Trump administration has great ambitions in the region, they haven't really staffed up enough and concentrated enough on implementation to realize them.
Yeah, I want to turn on those issues to Bernie for a second. There is a tendency, I think, to, and maybe you disagree with this, but a tendency on the part of the Trump administration to announce things before they're done, to put the cart before the horse, to say we've done this and this and that and the other thing, and with a headline, but with no, sort of like a blender where you get the box, but there's no machine inside. There's just nothing there. And I'm wondering if you think the Saudis feel this way, and if so, what can they do about it? Because it's the lack of it strikes me the bilateral relationship is hurt by a lack of a more coherent regional policy.
So, President Trump hasn't appointed an ambassador to Saudi or the UAE or Qatar. Clearly, he seems to be managing those files either himself or through his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, and Steve Witkoff. And as Greg just said, the State Department and NSC are not staffed up. And I'm not going to say more about what I think about these people. But anyway, for now, what the Saudis see is a clear contrast between what happened in the relationship, in the bilateral relationship, in the last year and a half or so under Biden. And I think that was probably one of the highest points of institution to institutional relations between the two countries. I don't think the two countries have ever kind of had, so many institutional connections at the level of intelligence, defense, diplomacy, across the board, and energy. And I think that was something that the Saudis noticed and they liked. They thought it was good. And now we're reverting to very transactional, very personalistic form of relationship. And if I were Saudi and I see what President Trump did with Prime Minister Modi of India, I would be worried. I would be worried that it's all chummy today, but he can turn on a dime, and ask you to do things that are unacceptable. So we're in that sort of phase now. And I suspect that the Saudis hanker for the last year of the Biden administration in terms of bilateral relations.
Yeah, that strikes me as right. I mean, I want to start bringing in some of the questions from the audience, which are really interesting. And Hisham, and anyone else who wants to answer this question, Cody Coombs asks if there's any comment on the recent Saudi cabinet decision approving a memorandum of understanding for judicial cooperation between the Saudi Ministry of Justice and the Justice Department here in the U.S.
Yeah, I saw the question. No, I have no comment. This is
Okay.
part of the MOUs that are set in the cooperation programs between different ministries and different government entities.
Anybody else want to tackle it?
I don't know what that's about, actually. I hadn't seen it, but I will say that Saudi Arabia is going on through a pretty extensive reform of their judicial system right now. Very important one, I think. It could be part of these old sort of cooperative agreements that we, used to have, where you have kind of expertise shared between, different countries, and the U.S. is doing that to share some expertise with the Saudis. I'm not sure about how up the DOJ is now on that sort of thing either. We could question that in the United States, but perhaps it's something like that. But I haven't looked into it.
Anybody else interested?
I mean, I would just say that virtually every Saudi minister is coming. Sorry.
No, it's fine.
Sorry.
Don't worry.
And virtually every Saudi minister is coming. The Saudis are coming with over 1,000 people on this trip. That's a huge delegation.
It's unusually large.
Yeah, very, very large. And so I think there will be a lot of MOUs. There will probably be something on on the judiciary or judicial agreements. There will be other things as well. I'll say one last thing, actually, which I forgot to say earlier, which is that the Saudis are going to sign a civilian nuclear power agreement. I suspect that they will, this is just speculation, but I suspect that they will give up, at least for now, on enrichment and processing. But they will want a nuclear umbrella protection from the United States, which may involve the deployment of U.S. nuclear weapons systems on Saudi soil.
So that would be the trade-off. The trade-off would be something like that in exchange for submitting to a 1, 2, 3 style arrangement, or where there's no enrichment by or in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, I've heard rumors to that effect.
That would make sense. Okay, so again, Hisham or anybody, we have a question about the role of AI in the relationship, both investment and security. So I'd like anybody, Hisham in particular, but anybody else also, to address AI in the bilateral.
What I can say is What Riyadh seeks from Washington is not off-the-shelf technology, but a genuine partnership and innovation, also capacity building. Three things are important, I think. Establishing advanced data infrastructure inside the kingdom, training Saudi talent to world-class standards, and co-investing in the foundation of an indigenous AI ecosystem, not only licensing tools. And this is very important. I'm not a diplomat, so I would say that so far the US has not offered a clear and consistent export regime for advanced technologies, while Asian partners on the other side, not only China, are moving really quickly and decisively on that path. I believe that the message from Riyadh will be unambiguous in that regard in this visit. Either the US steps up as a strategic tech partner, or the kingdom will expand its options, east and also west.
Yeah. So South Korea, Japan.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, obviously. Anybody else have any comments on AI?
This is not so much on AI, but it's a reflection on what Hisham just said, and it gets to, I think, the core of the very interesting position Saudi Arabia sits in right now globally. We've emphasized how much the Saudis rely on the United States on security issues, and I think that the broader Gaza war has just emphasized that. But at the same time, Saudi Arabia is hedging its bets might be a little too direct a way to put this, but Saudi Arabia is looking for partners, not just particularly on economic issues. And we know that the economic future of Saudi Arabia is as much directed east as it is directed west, because those are the customers. Right. Those are the energy customers, and that's been true for 2 decades. But also, I think it's Saudi Arabia has, we haven't mentioned this yet, is doing a bit of hedging even on the security side, and the security agreement with Pakistan, which I don't think we should over exaggerate its effects, but the timing is very interesting. And I think it is part of Saudi Arabia playing a role that both acknowledges the enormous importance of relations with the United States, but also acknowledges that they're not sure about American reliability.
Yeah. And that's just a fact, and it will remain a fact until it's addressed in some kind of stable way that's transferable and protected from the whims of executive decision.
If I can say, I want to say something quickly on Pakistan.
Sure.
I agree with Greg. I mean, the defense pact with Pakistan signaled that the kingdom not only possesses strategic alternatives, but knows and how to activate them. This wasn't a message to Tehran, as we kept hearing in the media. It was a signal to any actor who assumes that Gulf security can remain in a gray zone between vague promises and hesitancy. So yes, I agree with Greg on that point.
Okay, good. If we can move on from AI, then how about the importance of mediation and conflict resolution efforts in the bilateral relationship? Anna Jacobs wants to know about that. Really, is there a future for U.S.-Saudi cooperation on conflict resolution? We've talked a lot about the Saudi need, which Kristen has emphasized, particularly for security and stability. But everyone has mentioned it in one way or another. And now we have also the Pakistan agreement emphasizing the need for strategic diversification as well. So let's start with Kristen, but get everybody's views.
Sure. Well, this is something all the Gulf states have been using, and I think Saudi Arabia has been stepping up and using that more. And again, in an arena where stabilization is the name of the game, that they want a stable region that allows for really their top priority of economic global integration and the huge amount of investment that they need to move forward. I think they're interested in doing that in a number of files. I guess notably, Hisham had brought it up. There's a Sudan issue out there, which Saudi Arabia has been playing a role in. So that's one way that you can see that, and it's also an outreach of Saudi Arabia extending its sort of claim of having the Red Sea be an important kind of area for them. And I think Saudi Arabia looks at it as itself as a leader on both sides of the Arabian Peninsula. And the Red Sea obviously is where a lot of their investment is going these days. And they're going to want to see a secure area where they're very engaged in that whole area. And I think, Sudan being, along that East Coast is critically important. It also has strategic issues with other players that are playing there. And I think another way that the mediation works is you saw them stepping up and mediating on the Russia-Ukraine issue to release some hostages and some of these issues and agreeing to play a role. It increases their international prominence and kind of puts them at the center of things. And it also makes it a way so that if they're shifting at all, and we know at the time, the policies that they were taking towards Russia weren't always welcomed by the United States, particularly under the Biden administration. It shows a way that they can kind of shift and build their relations with those countries while still showing themselves to be useful and important for the United States. So it's a way to kind of play their broadening relations as something that's still positive. So that's the way I see them kind of using mediation.
And that's sort of also true. The strategic diversification issue has been true also for the other two major military partners of the U.S. in the Middle East, UAE and Israel. They've all been in this similar kind of situation. Can
I just add one quick word?
Go ahead, please.
So, the Saudis are not like the Qataris. They're not going to host non-state actors and terrorist organizations and then tell the Americans, we can talk to all these baddies for you. We might even subsidize them for you. And the Saudis are not going to do that. They're not going to ever host non-state actors. They're they see themselves as, and this is what's, I think, one of the great kind of inflection points in Saudi history is that it's gone from, in the past, flirting with pan-Islamic and Islamist ideologies and talking about this fate of Muslims in other countries to now we are a territorial nation state. It's the interest of the state. We are sovereign. We guard our sovereignty. We respect the sovereignty of other states, and we will not deal with non-state actors who are a menace to this order. I mean, they've finally kind of become they like the kind of norms and of the rules-based international order, and they want to adhere to that. So I would say in that respect they're different from Qatar. The one other point on AI just earlier, the Saudis are not just about sort of providing cheap energy, but they can also provide lots of land, and they can provide an environment with zero regulations or very few regulations. And that's very important if you want to be competitive with the Chinese. And so for American companies, it's quite important to be able to have this comparative advantage of at least three things. And the Saudis are building out the alternative energy. They'll turn half the country into a solar panel if necessary, and windmills, for this, and which also, by the way, frees up a lot of their oil for export. So it's a win-win on both fronts. So they're very committed to AI because they see this as a game changer in terms of economic development and growth, but also it's helpful to their energy, the traditional energy business as well.
Yeah. What about the question of F-35s and that cutting edge level of sensitive military technology, or whether for sale or for transfer? And I'm sort of thinking Greg might have some thoughts on that, but if anybody wants to tackle it.
I don't see any obstacles if the Saudis want F-35s. Look, I think that the obstacles on the UAE side for the promised F-35s were largely about relations with China.
Mm-hmm.
At least that was my understanding of it. I don't know how the second iteration of the Trump administration is viewing that. We certainly know that at least on the trip, the Trump folks were less concerned about safeguarding technology vis-a-vis the chips and AI stuff in terms of transfer and trade than the Biden people. I don't know where that will stand on military technology questions, but it's hard to see a bright line between AI and military, right? So if the Saudis want F-35s, my guess is the Trump administration would be more than happy to sell it to them. And while we know that the big ticket arms sales have to go through the Congress, there's a fairly good track record of Congress approving those big ticket arms sales for their own reasons.
Yeah, well, no doubt. Anybody else? Yeah, Bernie.
Yeah, I'll just say one thing. I don't think the Saudis are going to buy F-35s, and I think the reason they're not going to buy F-35s is because there are American conditions. Americans have a kill switch on the machine, and they also have the Saudis would need permission if they want to move the plane from one base to another within the country. So these are violations of kind of notions of sovereignty. If you pay for the machine, you kind of get to use it however you want. And so unless the Americans give up on those conditions, I don't think the Saudis will buy it. Also, they're very expensive. I mean, extremely expensive to maintain and to keep. You could, and lastly, the point that Greg made is a very important one. You really have to sever your ties to Chinese technology and certain chips, and certain communication systems if you're going to get the F-35. And that will only happen, I think, if an AI agreement, is signed and Saudi makes a clear and determined decision to go with America and to give up on China when it comes to AI and chips.
That sounds absolutely right to me.
Just one thing I would say on that.
Please.
I don't have much more to add on the military part, but I think Hisham mentioned that Yasser Ramayan, the head of the PIF, was here meeting with Scott Bessent. They were emphasizing very much ways to boost investment into America. So I know the Saudis are very interested in getting U.S. investment into Saudi Arabia. There is going to be a lot of pressure on this trip for the U.S. for Saudi Arabia to show the way that they're investing in the U.S. I don't know if this counts away, but I'm thinking, military purchases are expensive items, and that's one good way to show that they're investing in the U.S. that benefits Saudi Arabia. So,
can I say something on the conflict resolution point and how does the Saudi leadership sees itself? I mean, the difference is from 2018. I think MBS' current visit to Washington wouldn't be a repeat of 2018 for the simple reason that what separates the two visits is a fundamental shift in regional power dynamics and global influence. In 2019, the Crown Prince was still at the beginning of his rise. Today, he arrives not as a promising leader, but as a regional power broker and also a global actor whose role you cannot bypass. I mean, we have Russia and Ukraine as an example, but also we have the Saudi role and the two-state initiative. The kingdom is no longer seeking a seat at the table, I think. It has become the table itself, the platform which regional calculations are being restructured without exaggeration. And I think, and I think Sudan will be also on the top of the list when it comes to this visit, not only Gaza.
I was going to say that or ask that, but I think that's absolutely right. So, what about, and I guess I'd like Hisham to start with this, but anyone, if you want to talk about the energy relationship between the countries that begins with OPEC Plus and the price of oil. That's something that the Trump administration is very sensitive about. But there's a complexity to the energy relationship that that's kind of always under the surface of the U.S.-Saudi relationship, no matter what. So, or at least it has been historically. So what do you make of that? And if Hisham wants to go first, that would be fine, and anybody who wants to tackle it.
Um, if this wasn't recorded, maybe I would have said something else, but
It is recorded.
yeah. I mean, it's a sensitive issue. There are always disagreements, and there are always different policies between the two countries for obvious reasons. But what I see is we can, I mean, a common denominator and this energy relationship can be reached. Both countries have an interest that oil prices does not go up and also does not go down, because you will bankrupt local oil producers in the US.
Yeah, you need a floor and a ceiling, no doubt.
Yes, you need a floor and a ceiling. I think there is an agreement or a semi-agreement on the floor and the ceiling at the current moment. But I would like to be positive and say the positive things that this visit could result on. And I think there are the energy is much more, it's much more a stable relationship than the other things that I think that are more very fluid, and we could see a positive results in.
Could I add something there? Because I think
Please.
I think that the sensitivities are almost all on the American side here.
Yeah.
Because of the political impact of gasoline prices. And
that's right.
This trip is happening at a time when if you're the incumbent administration in the United States, gas prices are a plus for you, right? Yeah. They're lower than they were for a while. Yet they haven't gotten so low. Oil prices haven't gotten so low that they've wiped out shale production in the United States. Although I think we're getting to a price level where there's going to be less investment in shale in the United States, certainly in outside of Texas anyway. I think that my read on Saudi oil policy is it's much more determined by technical factors of where the ministry sees global supply and demand trends moving, plus the relationship among OPEC plus producers in terms of willingness to abide by quotas and the unwillingness of Saudi Arabia to take disproportionate cuts.
Right.
And I think that this has been the guiding desideratum of the ministry since the mid-1980s.
Yeah.
Saudi Arabia is willing to take cuts, but it's not willing to take disproportionate cuts and lose market share to other people. So I think that Saudi oil policy is much less about the bilateral with the United States and much more about these other factors. And every once in a while, American presidents will try to get the Saudis to do something to lower prices at the pump. But we're not in that kind of situation right now.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Just to comment, we might be a bit on the opposite of that too, because of course the main thing going on right now is the sanctioning of the Russian oil companies, Rosneft, and I think probably when Saudi Arabia looks at that makes them a bit anxious. It's something that we saw during the Biden administration too, which is importing countries, which of course the US is kind of almost like both, but importing countries or other countries looking more to their interests and being willing to be more active, intervening in markets, almost for political or economic reasons in oil markets. I don't think the Saudis like to see more of that interventionism going on. But on the other hand, I think the Saudis are in a position where they can help the US if we need more oil in the market because of something that's happening with these sanctions, then they're willing to step up for that. So,
yeah. Any thoughts on this, Bernie, or should we move on to the next?
I mean, I can just,
Please.
in two sentences. I mean, essentially, as Greg pointed out, the Americans every once in a while want to politicize oil production for domestic reasons, and the Saudis are extremely reticent to ever, after they learned their lessons in the 1970s, they don't want to politicize oil production.
No.
That said, I just checked the oil price. It's about $58, $59, which is well below where the Saudis would like it to be. I mean, Saudis want it in
80,
closer to,
right?
well, even maybe more, And
I'm just
it would be
saying that's
nice if it would be nice if
lower.
it were at 100, I
Sure.
think. And of course, that's not something Trump wants. Now, at the moment, we have, a very a very well supplied oil market. The Chinese are also not kind of consuming as much as they once did. The Indians haven't become the new China. So we're looking at a world in which Trump doesn't have to make, as Gregory said, it doesn't have to make the ask unless the Texas and shale producers start clamoring for cuts in production. Otherwise, I think or as Kristen said, if the Russian sanctions really kick in, we're looking at the Saudis not having to do much at all to please the Americans.
Yeah. Let me turn to Hisham to take the lead on examining, the question of reconstruction in Gaza, which is it's aspirational, right? I mean, the war basically is continuing. I mean, the ceasefire itself is aspirational, but it's been discussed a great deal, and so that if there is an opportunity to turn that from an aspiration into a reality, the assumption is that Saudi Arabia would play an important role politically, diplomatically, and in terms of financing. But how do the Saudis see it?
I think they still see it that they refuse to give a blank check for a crisis they did not ignite, nor that the Saudis want to be a channel for regional powers to legitimize unaccountable actors who lack both vision and competence. And at the core of Riyadh's position, I think there are two non-negotiable conditions, actually. There needs to be a full Israeli withdrawal from Gaza, and also there needs to be a credible commitment to the establishment of an independent Palestinian state, and also the removal of the militia's weapons. Absent these, any discussion of reconstruction becomes a waste of effort and time. This was the Saudi position early on, and I don't think it changed, and I don't think it will change in this visit.
That effectively means that it all depends on the outcome of the election in Israel. It's probably going to happen between March and May, but could be any time until October. So I'm wondering if any of the other three of you would like to jump in on the question of Gaza and reconstruction in particular. No, it doesn't seem so. Okay.
Well, I'll just say, I mean, we're kind of several steps away from that. I mean,
Yes.
right now, the three major things we're looking at is standing up an international stabilization force. I mean, I think right now the Trump administration has been going to the UN, which is sort of interesting. I'm not sure that's where they wanted to go, but there needs to be some kind of greater legal justification for some force going in to the territories. So they're kind of exploring that. They're not getting very far on that. And I would say some countries that maybe had expressed some willingness to be helpful, namely the UAE, is already sort of looking at the situation and saying, not looking too good right now. So I think that all that's to say is that the conditions to allow for the entry of an international stabilization force have not seen a lot of progress yet. Then there's the whole issue, as you mentioned, of disarmament of Hamas. Is this force supposed to do that? How is that supposed to be succeeded? How are we defining that? Over what length of time? All of those things are very unclear. And then there's the bigger issue of the reform of the Palestinian Authority, which would need to come in after the International Stabilization Force, which is another huge, huge issue, the whole question of Palestinian representation, which I think is a key one for Saudi Arabia, because again, I think they need, and in fact, all of the countries going into Gaza need the agreement of the Palestinians on some form to go in there, and to keep some tie between Gaza and the West Bank, which would be the Palestinian Authority, which gives you the potential for the future of a Palestinian state. So those are all big, tall orders. We have that curious situation where they may want to start rebuilding in the area where Israel is, which is not where the Palestinians are.
They're calling New Gaza in air quotes.
Yeah. So I don't know. I would imagine that is going to have to be U.S. funding. And it might be interesting if you could bring the U.S. to start putting more investment in Gaza in some form. I think it needs to be, as Hisham said, in a position where all of, the Israeli troops are out. But I guess if the U.S. were to start investing its own money there, then they may be more sensitive to the issue that it could be destroyed, which, we've seen outside funders rebuild Gaza numerous times and have it destroyed, which I think you need to have the U.S. buying in somewhat to alleviate that. But that's probably, again, a tall order and pretty far away.
It sort of reeks of a reconstruction version of the Gaza humanitarian fund, that sort of, a phony and dangerous humanitarian effort done in the worst way by the worst actors that, was a disaster and has now been abandoned, which I think would be probably a trajectory that this similar, scenario would follow. But it does set up another issue we haven't dealt with, which Manar al-Mahmoud raises, which is, and it's sort of connected to this, which is how about public opinion in both countries? How about public perceptions? The political implications and public opinion implications of this visit, both in Saudi Arabia and in the United States. So I would invite any of you who want to comment on that, please go ahead. And Kristen, maybe you're willing to, Bernie?
I mean, my sense is that this is a huge domestic win for the Crown Prince. It's really I hate to use the term, but it's like the crowning, of his success. Certainly in terms of foreign policy, if he ends up with, an open agreement, that is where there's a declaration of the Saudis and Saudi Arabia and America being strategic allies, with a series of other agreements. I mean, this is going to be seen as a huge success for him. I don't think he'd be coming with 1,000 people if he didn't think it was going to be a huge success. And in terms of inside the United States, I mean, I imagine some people, there are people on either side of the political spectrum, the restrainers or the isolationists on the one hand, and the I don't know what one would call them, the left, the Mamdanis of the world, I guess. I mean, are not going to ever be happy with, with the Crown Prince or with Saudi Arabia, because it's the fount of all evil as far as they're concerned. And so, but I imagine sort of most mainstream, politicians in both parties will welcome this.
Sure.
I actually don't think public opinion is all that important in this relationship. This has been an elite relationship from the beginning.
Yeah.
And in the United States, public opinion runs from not caring about Saudi Arabia to being really mad about Saudi Arabia. Yeah. And we're kind of in a position right now where people don't care about Saudi Arabia. After the Khashoggi killing, especially in elite opinion in the United States, there was, a real negative reaction, but I think right now we're at a point in the U.S. where Saudi Arabia is not a public opinion issue, and thus that gives people in not just in the administration but in Congress, if votes have to be taken, a little bit of leeway to consider, the core interests elements without having to worry about public opinion blowback. And on the Saudi side, I public opinion is there, but it's not a driver of foreign policy. It sets up, perhaps guardrails outside of which a prudent Saudi ruler wouldn't want to go, but it's not a driver
Oh,
policy.
the guardrails are include things like the reaction to the Gaza war.
Sure.
I mean, so it does. I find myself between the two of you.
Just
Well, if I think one of the major wins for the Saudi side and this visit that MBS enters Washington with a redefined vision. So it's strategic independence without a breakup with the US, and
Yeah.
a security partnership without dependency. And this is a qualitative difference from the past.
Yeah.
The relationship moved beyond being defined by political compliance from the Saudi side in exchange for military protection. I think this is in itself is a big win for the Saudis.
It's a more mature partnership rather than a kind of patron-client relationship or an exchange of one deliverable for another deliverable, oil and security. And it's just, it looks very different today.
I could say just one expansion from what Greg said. I mean, I think he's looking at it from the strategic position, the high strategic position, which I think is correct. But I do think when we look at where Saudi Arabia is in terms of their economic vision and what they're trying to accomplish, the Saudi embassy here does spend a lot of time on what we might think of public opinion, or reaching out to different kind of elements in U.S. society. And I think we could see that from the first MBS visit, where he went not just to Washington, but he also went up to Boston, trying to meet with universities. He also went to California, meeting with Hollywood and all these sorts of things. He went up to, I think, like Microsoft to meet with all of the tech people. All of these relationships show that, Saudi Arabia's economic diversification is also a broadening of the kind of ties that they need to keep developing and develop in the way that they want. So I don't know if it's public opinion, but they need the freedom to build those kinds of ties with businesses and with different people, whether it be Netflix and Google, which I think they're going to announce a big agreement with Google on this. Even with the arts groups like Desert X, they've been working with much broader array of people than we originally saw Saudi Arabia reaching out to. I think those relations are going to remain very important to achieving the Saudi vision. So I'm curious, I haven't seen anything about a wider trip this time or that kind of outreach, but I imagine there'll be some elements of that on this trip, even if it just takes place here in Washington.
Yeah, I mean, that is the question. Is it just a Washington trip? And then would this then perhaps set up a bigger visit next time, whether it's further into the Trump 2.0 or the next administration? I mean, I think you raise an important question. There is a Saudi interest in a broader set of American constituencies than just the one we find in Washington. So at what point does Saudi Arabia again find its leadership welcomed in that broader American milieu? Any of you want to tackle that issue?
Well, I think they have been. I mean, I think the stain of the murder of Jamal Khashoggi definitely hit hard. I think that was sustained for a number of years, which
are we past that is the question.
I think we are getting past it now. I'd say that doesn't lessen in a way the strength of it. I think it's hard to keep those kind of economic ties down. My own position is that, and I think that it did for a number of years. But I do see a lot of those relationships being rebuilt. And I watch the kind of arts in the soft space much more, which tends to be more sensitive to those things. And those are already starting to be rebuilt in many areas. So I think we are getting beyond that.
I completely agree with that.
I think we're beyond it almost everywhere but the editorial offices of the Washington Post.
Yeah. Oh, and it's understandable, right?
Sure.
That's a family affair.
Yeah.
So yeah. That seems completely reasonable to me. All right, so we're almost out of time, so I just want to go around once. For each of you, what are you going to be looking for? The key question that each of you would ask, point people, look for this, look for what is the metric that you will leave this visit from? And I'll begin with Hisham. And Kristen, Greg, and finally Bernie. So Hisham, go ahead.
I would say one thing: if the Saudis manage to to have a US-Saudi Section 123 civilian nuclear agreement. I think this will be a game changer, authorizing up to 16 reactors. Yes, I mean, in terms of influencing the economy, this wouldn't be a big thing, but in the political side of it, it's a big thing. It will, I guess it will only supply 15-20% of electricity for desalination industry, which will save oil, but the most important part of it is the ability to be building uranium tech exports, until now stalled as of April 2025 over enrichment rights. I think it will fortify US-Saudi bonds with security AI ties. It will check Iran, China, Russia. It will be a major thing, but also the AI path. If we see big deals on that path, then this will be also, I think, a big thing and a game changer.
Right, great. Kristen, what do you think? What would you?
I mean, I think the strategic security commitments are probably the most important thing. But I think for myself, what I'm watching for, and I mentioned it earlier, is to see if there are any of these announcements on kind of, or if not announcements, at least some move forward on these kind of bigger regional strategic issues, whether it be talks on how to approach Iran, how that might open doors, to Lebanon or broader issues in the Levant. I'm kind of interested to see, or even Sudan, if there's any political breakthrough that's not being talked about right now. I'm curious to see if there's anything moving on those fronts.
Okay, excellent. Greg, what do you think?
I'm with Hisham. I think the bellwether is going to be the extent of any kind of nuclear cooperation deal. Is it extensive? Is it limited? I think that's going to be a real signal of where we're going.
I do too. Bernie, what do you think?
I mean, it's hard to go after all my colleagues did. Yeah, I mean,
That's why I picked you for last, because you.
I know this. I mean, obviously, the security, the nuclear. There's a rumor that he's that MBS is going to give an interview to a major kind of outlet. That would be fascinating to watch and to see.
Good idea.
The mining and the AI is very important because it has all implications about the relationship with China. So, if they put all their eggs in the American basket on AI, what does that mean for Saudi-Chinese relations? Those are big, big questions, I think, for me.
Excellent. All right. Well, I think we've given everybody about as good a prep and scene setter for this trip as we could. And we will do this again very soon with a very similar panel, if not the same panel, after the visit. So we'll do a debrief. I want to thank Hisham Al-Ghanem, Kristen Diwan, Greg Goss, and Bernie Heikel for joining us today. And I would like to invite all of our viewers to join us again after the visit is concluded for a debrief and post event consideration of what has happened. So thank you all for joining us, and I really appreciate it, and see everybody next time at our next AGSI webinar. Thank you.